Windstorm deductible disclosure rules. We want to talk about that?
Yes. Yeah, so...
We do have a list of questions. So, interestingly enough, normally when we do these, I'll sit down with somebody and it's kind of like the first time they're seeing the list. Yeah. However, when I was with Kyla, we were going through this. I'm like, wow, I need to give Doug a heads up on this because this is all so new. And one of the things which I think even Kyla mentioned it, this discussion about the insurance changes with the bill has not had as much traction as some of the other stuff that's a little, let's call it sexier. Like, now we have to record all of our board meetings if we're doing it over video conference. Now that's that's to the front or stuff that you see. This is a little more complicated. So a Windstorm deductible disclosure rules.
Yeah, and Adoni mentioned yesterday that he had a conversation with Kyla, and I think in that podcast yesterday, not a conclusion, I guess, but a comment was, well, Doug's coming in tomorrow and he can answer that question, right? And I do think it's going to be a team approach, again, as I emphasized earlier, between the property manager, the board, the association attorney, the association insurance agent. Ultimately, the board's going to make a decision. In that case, too, though, I want to say I defer to counsel. I'm not legal counsel. I get questions like I'm legal counsel too often, but I defer people to legal counsel for that because if you make a decision as a board member, as a board, and that decision is challenged, you're likely going to seek legal counsel to represent you. And that same legal counsel might be the one that should be giving you the advice on what to do and what not to do. It shows just a process of due diligence. So if you go down this path of choosing lower limits of insurance, I think if you just do it, and you mentioned because we're going to save money, I don't think that's the right reason to do it per se. You want to do it because the statute enables, you checked with your attorney, you checked with your insurance agent, you checked with your property manager, and you made an informed, educated decision. So when it comes to Windstorm deductibles, and again, this is something that, existed some time ago too, where there was a statutory change that required that the association, as I recall, had to declare what the deductible was and how it was going to be funded. And I recall it might have been after Hurricane Charlie and Wilma that kind of came about the first time around, potentially. Was it that long ago, I think? Yeah.
I mean, I remember when it came in, but I don't remember. Anyway, yeah. It was after.
Changes always happen after storms. You know what I mean? So in my recollection, it might have been a few years after Hurricane Charlie and Wilma, where there was legislation that required that the association declare what the deductible was. So if you got a building insured for $10 million and your hurricane deductible is 3%, $300,000 is your deductible. So you must declare that, I think at a meeting minutes or something like that. And at the time too, as I recall, you also had to declare how you were going to fund that. Was it through reserves? Was it through a line of credit? Was it through a special assessment? And I can't say for certain why the legislators did it, but I suspect they just wanted people to kind of prepare, to have knowledge what the deductible was, and also then have some kind of a plan as far as how they were going to fund that deductible. Instead of just, waking up, you have a hurricane, oh, what's our deductible and how are we going to take care of that, right? So it caused some people to kind of, I think, just plan. So again, I don't think it's a bad thing.
The interesting thing that happened after it, so as I recall, and I'm just thinking back on this, when I remember we first did this, almost all of our hurricane deductibles were 5%. And then all of a sudden, they all went to 4%, but none of us actually, and I don't appreciate this, in most of our meetings, we never really voted to reduce the deductibles because there was this weird period of time where the deductibles kept coming down and the price was coming down. And then we ended up with these 1% hurricane deductibles and we were paying nothing for them.
You're right.
And so everybody was super happy, but then it impacted us again because it was kind of like insurance was going through the auto renewal process. Everybody's happy because we're not paying more and we're getting more. And then it reversed. And all of a sudden we had to start doing this again because, well, now we're using, first off, couldn't even get a 1% deductible.
Right. Still can't as of right now.
Yeah. So that went off the table. So we had to vote, but in addition to it, the insurance rates were doubling or something. And so it came back to the forefront.
By the way, just to clarify something, I should never say still can't right now because anything is possible in my space. Meaning, can you find a carrier that'll do a buy down to a 2 or a 1% deductible? Yes, you can. Would it likely be cost prohibitive and likely not make sense? That's a highly likely possibility, but anything is possible, I'll say, for a price. But yeah, as Adoni mentioned, I go back in time before Hurricane Irma, because after Charlie and Wilma, the market deteriorated for the consumer, deductibles went up, prices went up, terms deteriorated. As we got deeper after Charlie and Wilma and had a really quiet time up until Irma hit in 2017, I don't mean this in a negative way, but Probably Irma couldn't have happened at a better time because most associations had the lowest deductible they've had in quite some time before Irma came through, be it 1% or 2% or 3% as opposed to 5 or 7.5 or 10%. But after Irma came through, we saw a push for hurricane deductibles to go up, from 1% to 2 or 1% to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7.5. And we've seen that after Hurricane Ian too. Some carriers like American Coastal, I think in some situations, we're putting out a 10% deductible, each occurrence, not calendar year.
Well, if you look on personal property, which I didn't realize this, there are folks, which I don't understand how this works, but they have to have wind insurance and they have 25% hurricane deductible.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed banks go with that.
So there is a statute, and I'll paraphrase, that says something like this. You must have a deductible that's similar, consistent with what similar associations in a similar geographic region have. So historically, 2, 3, and 5 were kind of the norm. But after Hurricane Ian came through, more so Ian than Irma, probably, we saw carriers going to 7.5%, 10%. On the East Coast, State Bar Brevard County, carriers were going to 15 and 20%. So on commercial residential condo associations, high-rise.
That. Like I
not so much on this coast.
Residential, like just personal properties, they were having 25% or higher deductibles on their individual single-family homes.
Yeah, I don't do personal insurance myself, but we saw some of that. On this coast, it wasn't as high a percentage as it was the East Coast. We're not as a high hazard wind pool area as State Bar Brevard County, and Monroe County, some of the highest hazard areas, Tier 1 counties, I think they call them in the state of Florida. But yeah, I have had some associations. So I guess where I'm going with that is if the statute says you must have deductible that's similar, consistent with what similar associations in a similar geographic region have, if the trend used to be 2, 3, and 5 and now became 5, 7.5, and 10, I'm not a legal scholar, but less likely to be a violation of the statute, I think, if you choose a higher deductible. And I do have some clients that are looking at higher deductibles and the potential benefit. I don't think it's so much a significant, there is some premium benefit, and it in some cases makes more sense with, mid-rises or high-rises that have significant value, because if you have a $100 million building, with a 5% deductible, the likelihood of you collecting on a claim from a hurricane on a building like that is reduced immensely. So why not consider a higher deductible and the measurable premium savings? But yeah, right now we're kind of in an environment, as Adoni mentioned, where deductibles are actually, I've done a few 2% deductibles recently. It's on a selected basis, not across the board. Maybe one carrier's doing it right now. But again, that's what the carriers have to do to offer something else that distinguishes them from their competition, something that's better for the client right now. Yeah.
Now, with the declining deductibles is obviously a really good sign for our market. I always felt, and they talk about in ecosystems like the apex predator, and that tells you how everything's doing underneath it. To me, that's deductibles. When I see deductibles going down, that means that things are getting better, right? Because
that's true.
You said something which was, I've believed and I've never verbalized. They first try to compete on price,
right,
and then they try to compete on everything else afterwards. And so once you're getting to deductibles and that, that, okay, price is about as good as we're going to be starting to get. Let's start to, find somewhere to provide a tangible benefit.
Right.
So hopefully this isn't going to be as big of an issue, but something that came up, and also maybe I just don't remember it, or it's also possible Newell was managing much smaller things back 10, 12, 15 years ago, was this layering that we started to see that came about a couple of years ago. We'd have directors that are like, why do we have 2 or 3 property policies in place? And this mostly I saw on our high rises. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Let me know, what are you seeing in the market? Are we getting away from that? So what's going on with umbrella policies? Because I was going to mention it. Umbrellas used to be like the cheap thing that we just kind of threw in. It was like $2,000 for $50 million or something. It might not be quite that. But now umbrella policies are quite a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
So, and there's more exclusions and all sorts of stuff.
So first off, one last thing on deductibles. I do think it's, I've always taken the approach with the insurance companies, probably a similar approach I should have taken in high school, asking a girl out on a date. Ask. The worst they can say is no, right? Keep asking. Be persistent. Same thing with insurance companies. Right now, I'd say the consumer is in a stronger position as far as acquiring insurance for the residential condo association when it comes to property insurance. So certainly your insurance agent that you work with as a property manager should exhaust that avenue to make sure they get deductible options, present that to the association.